A gateway to hell, the truth behind an iconic horror, The Exorcist. Just the name sends chills down your spine, a movie so terrifying, it spawned countless nightmares. But what if I told you, the true horror lies not in fiction, but in reality? This is the story of a young boy, possessed by an entity so dark, it shook the very foundations of faith. This is the real story behind The Exorcist. Our journey takes us back to 1949, to the peaceful suburbs of Maryland. Here, evil would soon cast a long and terrifying shadow. This is not a story for the faint of heart, it is a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks at the edges of our world. The Devil's Grip, the case of Robbie Mannheim. His name, for the sake of privacy, became Robbie Mannheim, a seemingly ordinary 13-year-old boy living a simple life. But beneath the surface, something sinister was brewing. It began subtly strange noises, objects moving inexplicably, harmless pranks or something more sinister. The family, devout Lutherans, initially dismissed these events. They clung to logic, to reason, but the truth was far more terrifying than they could have ever imagined. As days turned into weeks, the disturbances escalated. The boy, once cheerful and bright, grew withdrawn and sullen. His behavior became increasingly erratic, his words laced with an unsettling malice. The family was left bewildered, their home transformed into a battleground for something they couldn't comprehend. They were about to come face to face with pure evil. Trapped in a nightmare, the people haunted. At the heart of this chilling tale stood the boy's family. His mother, a woman of quiet faith, found her world collapsing around her. Her son, her flesh and blood, was transforming into something she no longer recognized. The aunt, a woman of science and reason, found her skepticism crumbling. The events defied explanation, challenged everything she thought she knew. Their priest, a man of God, found himself thrust into a battle against an ancient evil. His faith, once unshakable, was put to the ultimate test. The doctors, men of medicine and logic, were baffled. Their diagnoses fell short, their treatments useless against the unseen force that held the boy captive. They were witnessing something beyond the realm of science, something that whispered of realms beyond our own. Section 4. The Unthinkable Unfolds. A Timeline of Terror. This is a chilling account of a family's descent into a world of the unknown, where the boundaries between reality and the supernatural blur. January 1949. The disturbances began subtly. At first it was just a few odd occurrences that could easily be explained away. Scratching sounds within the walls. These noises were faint at first, almost like the scurrying of small animals, but they grew louder and more insistent with each passing night. Objects moving inexplicably across rooms, chairs would slide across the floor, and small items would be found in places they had never been left. The family, though unsettled, dismissed these events as pranks. They tried to rationalize the occurrences, thinking perhaps it was the work of mischievous children or even their own imaginations. They were just beginning to glimpse the darkness that awaited them. Little did they know, these were just the opening acts of a much darker play. February 1949. The events grew more frequent, more intense. What started as minor disturbances soon escalated into a full-blown haunting. Unexplained noises, often guttural and animalistic, echoed through the house. These sounds were unlike anything the family had ever heard, sending chills down their spines. Furniture moved on its own as if controlled by an unseen hand. Tables would tip over and heavy furniture would shift positions overnight. The family's initial fear morphed into something deeper, more primal. They began to feel a constant sense of dread, as if they were being watched by unseen eyes. They were living in a nightmare, and the nightmare was only just beginning. Each day brought new horrors, and the nights were filled with terror. March 1949. The boy's behavior became increasingly erratic. He would have violent outbursts, and his once gentle demeanor changed drastically. He would lash out violently, his voice contorted into something inhuman. It was as if another entity had taken control of him, speaking through him in a voice that was not his own. He spoke in tongues, spouting Latin phrases he couldn't possibly know. These phrases were often dark and ominous, adding to the family's growing fear. The family, desperate and terrified, finally sought help from their local priest. They had exhausted all other options and were willing to try anything to rid themselves of the malevolent presence. They had stumbled upon a horror far greater than they could have ever imagined. The priest's arrival marked the beginning of a new chapter in their ordeal, one that would test their faith and their sanity. The priest began performing exorcism rituals, hoping to cleanse the house of its dark presence. These rituals were intense and grueling, pushing both the family and the priest to their limits. The family watched in horror as the boy convulsed and screamed, the entity within him fighting to maintain its hold. It was a battle of wills, with the boy's very soul hanging in the balance. There were moments of hope, brief respites where it seemed the exorcism might be working. But the entity was strong, and it would not be banished easily. The final confrontation was a harrowing experience, one that left the family forever changed. They had faced the unthinkable and survived, but the scars of their ordeal would remain with them always. In the end, the exorcism was successful, and the family found peace. But the memory of those dark days lingered, a reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown. Section 5. The Devil's Mark, Physical Manifestations of Evil. This chapter delves into the eerie and unsettling signs that evil leaves behind, tangible evidence of its presence. As the weeks wore on, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly oppressive. The once warm and inviting home now felt like a prison, its walls closing in with each passing day. The boy's body became a canvas for the demonic. His skin, once smooth and unblemished, now bore the marks of an unseen tormentor. Scratches, deep and angry, appeared on his flesh, forming words, warnings, and blasphemies. These marks were not random. They seemed to carry a message, a dark communication from the other side. His bed shook violently as if an earthquake were centered beneath his mattress. The violent tremors would often wake the entire household, leaving them in a state of panic and confusion. Objects flew across the room, propelled by an unseen force. Books, toys, and even furniture would be hurled with such force that it seemed impossible for any human to be responsible. The family watched in horror as their home was transformed into a battleground for a war waged between this world and the next. Their once safe haven had become a place of terror and uncertainty. The air grew heavy, thick with the stench of sulfur. This foul odor permeated every corner of the house, a constant reminder of the malevolent presence that had taken root. A cold spot settled over the boy's room, a chilling reminder of the evil that had taken root within their home. This cold was unnatural, a bone-chilling frost that seemed to sap the warmth from the very air. These were not mere tricks of the light, not hallucinations of a frightened family. The phenomena were captured on camera, providing undeniable evidence of the supernatural occurrences. These were physical manifestations of something dark and powerful, something that defied explanation. The family was left grappling with the reality of their situation, unable to find solace or understanding. The boy was no longer himself. His once bright and cheerful demeanor had been replaced by a sullen and distant presence. It was as if the light within him had been extinguished. He was a vessel, a conduit for something ancient and evil. This malevolent force had taken hold of him, using his body as a means to manifest its dark intentions in the physical world. The family could only watch in despair, hoping for a way to reclaim their son from the clutches of this ancient evil. Section 6. Voices from the Abyss, The Exorcism of Robbie Mannheim. The first exorcism took place in St. Louis, Missouri within the hallowed halls of a Catholic hospital. It was a place where the sacred and the profane collided, a battleground for the soul of a young boy. The priests, armed with faith and holy water, engaged in a battle of wills against the entity that held the boy hostage. Their prayers were their weapons, their faith their shield, as they confronted the darkness that had taken hold of Robbie. The air crackled with tension as Latin incantations filled the room, clashing against the guttural growls emanating from the boy's lips. Each word spoken by the priest seemed to provoke a violent reaction from the entity within. The boy, his body racked with convulsions, fought back against the priest's efforts, his voice a chilling chorus of anger and despair. His eyes, once innocent, now glowed with a malevolent light, a stark contrast to the purity of the prayers being recited. The exorcism, a grueling battle between good and evil, spanned weeks. Each session left the priests more drained, yet more determined. They knew that giving up was not an option. The stakes were too high. The demon, resistant and defiant, clung to the boy with terrifying tenacity. It was as if it drew strength from the boy's suffering, feeding off his fear and pain. The priests, exhausted but resolute, refused to abandon the boy to his fate. Their faith was their anchor, their resolve unshakable. They believed that with enough perseverance, they could drive the demon out. The battle for Robbie's soul was far from over. Each day brought new challenges, new horrors, but also new hope. The priests could see glimpses of the boy they were fighting to save, moments when the darkness seemed to recede. It would test their faith, their resolve, and their very understanding of the nature of good and evil. The exorcism was not just a physical battle, but a spiritual one, a test of their beliefs and their commitment to their faith. They knew that the outcome would not only determine Robbie's fate but also reaffirm their own faith in the power of good over evil. As the exorcism continued, the priests prayed with rosaries in hand, their voices steady and unwavering. They believed that light would eventually break through the darkness, that their prayers would be answered. Slowly, Robbie began to show signs of recovery. There were moments when his eyes would clear, and he would speak in his own voice, free from the influence of the demon. These glimmers of hope fueled the priests' determination, giving them the strength to continue. The final exorcism ritual was the most intense. The priests gathered all their strength, their faith, and their willpower for one last push. As they recited the final incantations, the room seemed to vibrate with a powerful energy. The demon's hold on Robbie weakened, and with a final desperate cry, it was expelled from his body. Robbie was finally free. The priests, though exhausted, felt a profound sense of relief and gratitude. They had faced the abyss and emerged victorious, their faith reaffirmed, their spirits unbroken. Robbie's expression was peaceful, his body no longer racked with convulsions. The priests offered silent prayers of thanks, knowing that they had been instruments of a higher power in this battle against darkness. As sunlight streamed into the room, it felt like a symbol of hope and renewal. The exorcism of Robbie Mannheim was a testament to the enduring power of faith, the resilience of the human spirit, and the eternal struggle between good and evil.